Britain has a long history stretching back thousands of years. In every part at some point, a bloody or mysterious event has taken place. Murders, bloodthirsty revenge, plagues, punishment and folklore will make your flesh shudder in terror. This is Mysterious Britain, Tales of the Unknown. In August 1809, wherryman Joseph Becksfield had been enjoying a drink with his fellow sailors when he suddenly remembered that he had left a parcel for his wife on the wherry. Fearing her disappointment and cold reception, Joseph decided to leave the inn to travel back to the boat and grab the parcel, before walking back home to his wife and 2 children. Despite the pleading from his friends not to venture out into the night for fear of the lantern man, Joseph pointed out to his friends that he knew the marshes near his home well, before heading off into the eerie darkness outside. That was the last time he was seen alive, when Joseph failed to return home or show up for work the following morning. A search of the marshes was carried out. No traces of the 38-year-old were found. Joseph's body finally washed up on the banks of the River Yare 3 days later. The lantern man had claimed another victim. A lantern man is an atmospheric shadow ghost holding a lantern, described in folklore of the fens of East Anglia, with sightings around Wicken Fen and other areas. According to the stories first collected by folklorist L.F. Newman, the lights are believed to be evil spirits who attempt to draw victims to their death in the reed beds. Newman writes that the spirits are attracted by the sound of whistling, and that a way to evade them is to lie face down on the ground with your mouth in the mud. A local fisherman gave evidence to this when he recounted to parapsychologist Peter Underwood how he had been stalked by the lantern man, and, in desperation, had thrown himself to the ground to escape the attention of this sinister stalker, which had been drawn to his whistling. Another local man recounted how he had attracted the attention of the lantern man while whistling to his dog while walking out on the fen. The man had fled and took shelter at the home of a friend, who hung out a horn on a long pole to distract the spirit. The following morning, the horn was found to have been burnt up. Another way of escaping the lantern man is that if 2 men were on opposite sides of a field and the lantern man approached, whistling would draw its attention, and in this way 2 travellers could whistle in turn, and if they were far enough apart, lure the lantern man to and from until they escaped. If you thought that carrying your own torch would deter the lantern man, then you would be sorely mistaken, as reports from sightings said that he always in fact ran towards the light. In the 1870s, Walter Rye wrote, "Once I heard of one following a man while he was carrying a lantern one night. The man knew what to do. He set the lantern down and ran away as if the devil kicked him. When he ventured to look around again, there was the lantern man, kicking the lantern over and over again." The lantern man is dismissed by skeptics, who reason that the reported phenomenon is nothing more than sightings of combustible marsh gas. But to this day, many have bore witness to this shadowy figure stalking them over the fens. Sightings of mermaids have been numerous over the years, often made by sailors far out at sea, but Upper Sheringham in Norfolk can boast its own unique connection. One cold winter night on a sandbank off Sheringham, a mermaid sang to the wondering stars, forlorn and all alone. It seemed her searching voice heard an answering call. Echoing through the streets came the sweet sound of human voices, raised in harmony amid cascading peals of church bells. Enchanted, she hurled herself onto the pebble beach. Her silvery fish's tail was cumbersome in the cold air, but the singing was so beautiful, she dragged her body inch by inch over the rough streets and into All Saints' Church. But these were fishing folk, and mermaids were unpredictable creatures, agents of both fortune and disaster, changeable as the sea. Besides, they have no immortal soul, so the people were afraid and cast her out. When they'd gone, she crept back into the church, and she's there still. At All Saints in Upper Sheringham, you'll find a mermaid carved into the end of a 15th century pew. Perhaps angels took pity on the sea nymph's lonely heart, and, as wooden figurehead guides ships to harbour, they brought her safely home. Tidymon was a legendary bog spirit in England who was believed to have the ability to control the waters and mists of the fens of South Lincolnshire, the Carrs of the North Lincolnshire and fens of the Isle of Ely. The Tidymon was described by folklorist M.C. Balfour in 1891 as being no bigger than a 3-year-old child, but looking like an old man, with long tangled white hair and a matted white beard. He is said to have worn a grey gown, so that at dusk he is difficult to see. His laughter is said to resemble the call of the peewit. The belief in Tidymon was first documented in June 1891 in an article by M.C. Balfour in the Folklore Society journal Folklore. In the article, she recalls a story collected in Ankime Valley, told to her by an older person who spoke of a curse of pestilence that had been cast upon his village by the Tidymon, who was angered at the draining of the fens by the Dutch in the 17th century. According to the story, the Tidymon was eventually placated after the villagers gathered at twilight, at the time of the new moon, poured buckets of water into the dike and apologised for the damage caused. He was not exclusively malevolent. If the fens flooded and the waters reached the villages, people would go out at night and call Tidymon, which out a name that waters thrift, until they heard the cry of the peewit, and the next morning the waters would have receded. Writing in 1955, folklorist E.H. Rudkin also records another Elkhorn Valley belief of an imp-like race of beings who were generally considered mischievous but benevolent. They were called the Tiddy people, but also the Strangers, Greencoaties and Yarfkins. The Tiddy name relates to their size, and Rudkin quotes a source describing them. They be tiddy critters, no more than a span high, with arms and legs as thin as thread, but great big feet and hands, and heads rolling about their shoulders. The Tiddy people would dance by moonlight on large flat stones, known as strangers' stones, found in the area. Rudkin records a local tradition of smearing the stones with blood and lighting fires on them, but was unable to determine a meaning or specific belief behind this practice. The first of the crops would also be left on the strangers' stones, as well as bread and salt, to keep the Tiddy people happy and ensure a good harvest.